What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Swish Life Garage. I'm back with it here on my 95 Civic. I've been driving it quite a bit since I got it on the road, put over about 2,200 miles on it about now, and it still has some issues. I know it has some issues, but it was enough to get me around. I just really been busy, but finally the CV axles are starting to give out. Definitely this passenger one here is giving me a lot of shaking whenever I go about 40 miles an hour on up, and as well whenever I start braking hard, I'm going to start to feel that shake in the steering wheel. So I'm going to be fixing this CV axle here first on this passenger side, and then I'll get on to the driver side. I'm going to be filming everything probably in different days, and that's just because I'm waiting for some of the parts through the mail. So I'm going to loosen up the lug nuts here on this wheel, and I'll walk you guys through everything. And of course, before I start, have the handbrake on and a chuck behind this front wheel on the opposite side that I'm working on. I'm just lifting the car up high enough to get the wheel off real quick so I could take off the center cap here for the wheel and have access to the center axle nut. The center nut has an indention on there just to keep it from backing out if that was to ever happen, and so I need to take that indention out before I take off this nut. I just loosely put the lugs on. I'm gonna put the wheel on the ground and take off that center nut, and that's just so the wheel or the CV axle won't spin. The socket I'm using is a 1 1/4. I believe it's supposed to be like a 30 mil or 32, something like that, but this is just what I have on hand that fits. Now I need to disconnect the tie rod from the knuckle, and as well the lower control arm, separate that so I'll be able to move this knuckle to the side and I'll be able to get that CV axle on out. Take off your cotter pins off of the lower control arm, and for the tie rod, both of the nuts for here are going to be a 17. This tie rod, usually just give it a light hit on here and it'll just disconnect from the knuckle. Just like that. And as you can tell, my tie rods need to be replaced too. And for the lower ball joint, I have the ball joint separating tool. There, the lower ball joint is disconnected. I'm able to just lift it on out. But I wanted to show you guys CV axle. I had seen this already. I knew it was going to go out, but it started giving me that shaking, that vibration while driving, so I had to go ahead and replace it because I really can't drive. Just kind of push it forward, push it in, and then I'm going to get this knuckle on out. There it is. It's off of the lower control arm, and there's that CV joint right there. So next I'm going to take off this suspension fork so we get this out of the way and able to get it completely out. This bolt up here is a 14. And that lower bolt and nut is going to be a 17. Got to get a wrench on one side to keep it from spinning, and then just take off that nut. Able to get that out the way. Whenever I lifted up the car, I lifted up pretty much as high as I could go to one side up here, and so I could try to keep the transmission oil inside of there whenever I take out the CV axle. As well, do have an oil pan down here. Gonna go ahead and get this on out. And as you guys had seen, that pretty much came out pretty easy. And here's the CV axle I was rolling on. Torn boot. And here's the CV axle that I'm going to use. This is off of my 2000 Civic, the one that got totaled from the wreck. No need to purchase them when I have them here. And in here I did clean up the transmission a little bit, clean up some of that dirt and grease that was on there just to make it a little bit cleaner. But I am going to take out the output seal and put in a new one. The new seal that I'm using is a national seal, part number 4901. Get that one in there pretty easily. Just push it side to side until it's all nice and even with the transmission. And now ready to put in the CV axle. All that is back on. I'm going to put the suspension fork back here. I just loosely have the bolts on here for the lower control arm for the suspension fork. Now I'm going to put some NICs on the CV axle before I put it onto the knuckle so it doesn't seize up on there whenever I try to take it off next time. The knuckle is on. I could put the tie rod back on here and tighten up the nut. The nut is going to be torqued down to 32 foot-pounds. And also I could tighten up the nut for the lower control arm, the lower ball joint, and that's going to be to 36 to 43 foot-pounds. Now I have load on the suspension here, and now I'm able to tighten up the suspension fork here that you guys could see connected to the lower control arm and the strut. The 14 that is right here, that's going to be the 32 foot-pounds. And now the lower pinch bolt down here is going to be the 47 foot-pounds. I got all the suspension tightened up. I got the suspension fork, strut fork, the pinch bolt here for lower control arm, lower ball joint, got the tie rod tightened up, and so now ready to tighten up the center nut for the CV axle. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the wheel on. Once I have the wheel on, take out the jack stand and set it on the ground just so we don't have it turning by itself. Torque down that CV axle nut to 137 foot-pounds. And it is recommended after you torque it on down, take the wheel on off and make that indention into the CV axle so you don't have the nut ever undo itself. Me, honestly, I never do that just so it's easier. Just take off the nut and I don't have to just bend it. But that's just what I do. Like I said, it is recommended that you make that indention on there. But now I'm going to put on the center cap, and all I gotta do next is just torque down these lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds. I'm going to be doing the driver's side CV axle, and same thing, I already got something behind the wheel here to keep it from going back just in case. And I'm going to take off the wheel real quick, take off that center cap so I have access to the center nut, get that loose, and then we'll get everything jacked on up and start working on it. Everything's jacked up and safe to work on, and first thing I'm going to take off is this tie rod end. Take off the cotter pins. I'm going to be taking this off and then taking off the lower ball joint, the nut for that. We'll be separating that. Again, taking off the suspension fork, the top bolt, and the lower sandwich bolt for the lower control arm. So let me get right to it. There it is, everything is off. Once you have all your tools laid out and everything ready to go, everything comes off pretty quickly. So all I gotta do is take off this CV axle from over there. I do have my pry bar and just gonna get that on out and have a oil pan down there just in case. But I did raise it up pretty much as high as I could go to try to keep that oil up in there as of now. I'm gonna scoot on down here and try to get this CV axle out. Here's that CV axle. You could tell it's just kind of slinging grease out and probably leaking out through this output seal. I am going to be changing that as well, just like the other side. But this CV axle was giving me vibration, not as much as the passenger side, but it still was. I could still feel it within the steering wheel. The outer joint here is just torn up, slinging grease all around like the brakes and stuff. After this, it should be riding a whole lot better. I am going to get down on in here. I'm going to try to get up on in here and clean up some of that grease off the transmission. So I cleaned things up just a tad bit, just around the CV axle area here on the transmission, and just underneath the transmission as well. And took out that output seal. The seal I'm going to use is National Oil Seal, part number 710315. There's the seal right here. This one is a little bit different than that passenger side. Passenger side, at least from National Oil Seal, had some ridges on there, so each time you pushed it in, it kind of like clicked in. This one doesn't, so I'm going to put some oil on there and try to push it in on evenly. Is on there, and I do have the other CV axle right here. This is just the driver's side to the 2000 Civic that had gotten totaled. Only about 20,000 miles, I believe, that are on it. Now that everything is prepped up, I can install this into the car. Alright, I got everything on there just like the other side. After you put on the CV axle, you put on the suspension fork, put on the pinch bolt down here. You got the pinch bolt up here for the shock, and then got the tie rod, put that on. First thing I'm going to torque down is the pinch bolt for the shock at 32 foot-pounds. And next up, I'm going to do the lower control arm pinch bolt for that suspension fork, and that's at 47 foot-pounds. Alright, and now I'm going to do the tie rod. Last thing I need to torque down is lower ball joint, and of course 36 to 42 foot-pounds. Already torqued down the lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds, torquing down the CV axle center nut to 137 foot-pounds. Now, last thing I'm going to do for this video is change out the manual transmission fluid here. And you can use the 10W30 for these Honda manual transmissions. I heard it works fine. Honestly, I've never used it, but what I use is Synchro Mesh, either from Pennzoil or from Valvoline. So I'm going to get this thing jacked on up. Already have a wheel chock behind on the driver's side. I got the car jacked up and have a jack stand just for safety there. And I'm going to use my Milwaukee impact here. Right there is the drain bolt. If you don't know, you just need a ratchet, or in this case, an impact. It'll probably be a little tight, but we'll see. Honestly, pretty much I was kind of expecting that it hardly had fluid in there. I'm going to remove the jack stand so I can lower the car a little bit, hopefully get some more fluid out of here. Alright, all the oil dripped out, cleaned up the drain bolt a little bit. Close this on up. This drain bolt is probably only torqued down to about 25 foot-pounds. I just do it hand tight with the ratchet. Just give it a nice little push. That should be tight enough. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time and try to just clean up some of this crud here. Here's the oil that came out of the transmission. There was already a little bit of dirt in here, so don't mind some of the little chunks in here, but definitely in the oil you see all this glitter type stuff, and that's going to be your synchros. Boom, that's cleaned up a tad bit. Going to take the jack stand from under here and lower the car. Now at the back of the transmission here at the speed sensor, I also cleaned up in this area, and that's because I'm going to take out the speed sensor, which you see right there. That's held on by one 10mm bolt, and I'm going to be filling up the transmission from the speed sensor hole. There is the vehicle speed sensor. After I took out the VSS, I had some more access to some dirt that was back here, so just put a rag in the hole there and scrubbed on up and took out the dirt pretty easily. I'm going to put in the funnel here that I have and pour in the fluid. Here's the funnel I'm going to use. I could just easily put that spout in there and be able to pour in the fluid through here. That's how I have the funnel in here. The oil I'm using is the Valvoline Synchro Mesh, and this transmission takes 1.9 quarts. I'm just going to go ahead and pour 2 of these in for 2 quarts, just be slightly overfilled. The speed sensor installed, so the transmission fluid change is finished up, and as well the CV axles for both the passenger and the driver side, changing out those output seals. Definitely on the driver side the output seal was leaking, so I was able to fix that, along with the shaking that I was experiencing in the steering wheel. Once I reached about 40-45 miles an hour, it was definitely noticeable, and whenever I started braking, especially when I started braking hard, get a lot of shaking in the steering wheel, and you could feel it throughout the car. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. Hopefully you got some good information, able to change out the CV axles for yourself, as long as you have the right tools. And these tools really aren't too expensive, especially if you're working on your own car and plan to do it in the future. You're going to save yourself lots of money, so it's just an investment for the future and for yourself. Now if you guys have any questions, drop them down below in the comment section. As well, check out the description, have a link to my eBay and my Etsy. If you guys want to support the channel in any way, definitely can do it down there. Make sure you like this video and are subscribed to the channel. I'm gonna have to catch you on the next one, player.